In this video, I'm going to show you how I created this journal or folio using regular brown paper bags as the base. I'll also be using some Paper Rose Studios pattern paper for this project. Hi, this is Anna of Crafty Anna Studio. Welcome to my YouTube channel where I post paper crafting and card making tutorials. First, I'd like to show you the pattern paper that I used to create this folio. It's the Afternoon in the Park Basics from Paper Rose Studios. 12 double-sided pattern papers, 2 each of 12 designs. At the back of the first page, we have some sentiments which you could use for your projects. The first page is a cut-apart page where you have various images, and on the reverse side is a repeating pattern of flowers. This one is pattern of ivy leaves, and on the reverse is a green gingham design. And of course, in every pattern paper 12 by 12 sheet of Paper Rose Studios, you do have a branding strip for the design as well. This one is a repeating design of beautiful roses, and on the reverse is a pink polka dot sheet. This one is a nice plaid design in coordinating colors. On the reverse is a beautiful soft lavender pattern. And next we have a cut apart sheet of tags. And on the reverse, a beautiful soft aqua polka dot design. This one is, I would say, like antique typewriter keys. And on the reverse, we have a nice grid pattern. And then there are 6 more sheets of the same designs. I actually used the 6x6 version of this collection for a mini album, which I will link below. Now I'm going to show you the embossed die cuts that is part of this collection. I use this to embellish my folio. So there are 4 sheets of embossed die cuts. When I say embossed, they have this shiny look that sticks out a little, and these are held together by tabs. So you don't really need to fussy cut each image out. See how they shine? They have a light shine on them. Before we head on to the tutorial, I'm going to give you a quick look at the folio or album that I created. The backstory that inspired me to create this album is that I went on this trip with my girlfriends back in 2002 to the south of France. And I collected a lot of souvenirs along the way, and they were still in a box that I've never gotten around to make into a scrapbook or album. So I decided that this would be the perfect project to use for that. And I'm going to show you how I used it later on in the video. So this folio or album has pockets that you can insert like postcards and ephemera, photos, there's little tuck spots. And here, the really fun part of this album is I have to show you this. You have some places where you can flip open, little interactive design here. And then they have additional pockets. I've added a tab on one side. I put the embossed die cuts to decorate the album. I've also added tuck spots to place photographs. And then I have this really interesting part of the paper bag where I kept open, and you can put like extra stuff that don't fit into the album itself. And here I put a tab. Here I inserted one of the cut aparts. And here it opens up again where you can insert more stuff, more cut aparts. And then that's it. That's the end of the album. So there's a lot of stuff that you can put in this folio. You can even add more pages if you want. I've also added a ribbon so you can tie it closed. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to show you how I use this as a travel journal for my trip to the south of France. Here's the front cover, which I decorated with the embossed die cuts. Then I tucked in the itinerary on the first page. On the next 2 pages, I tucked in the postcards that I collected along the way. I put in the train tickets in the vellum pockets. I also added a watercolor painting of a monastery that I visited, restaurant calling cards, tickets to the museum. These are just some of the stuff that I fit into this folio. Now let's get started on this tutorial. To create this folio, you will just need 3 pieces of regular brown paper bags, measuring 12 inches in length and 6 inches in width. You will also need an embroidering needle. This one is a multi-purpose needle pack that I got on Amazon. You can see here different kinds of needles for bookbinding and sewing. And then I have here some embroidery floss. And I'm using a different collection to make this album for this tutorial. And this one is the Flower Shop collection, also by Paper Rose Studios. And I'll have that link below just in case you're interested. Now, take the 3 paper bags and set one aside for the cover. We're going to use that later. Now, these 2 paper bags, we're going to cut and trim the edges so that there's a more finished look. You see, paper bags have these jagged edges at the top, and I'm just going to cut a very small portion off, just like that. And I'm going to do this to the second one as well. Next, I'm going to fold both of them in half, just like that. This will be for the pages of the album. Then after folding them in half, I'm going to tuck one inside the other, but I'm going to reverse one like this and then tuck it in with the other. And so that will form the pages of the album. Next, I'm going to take the third piece that I had set aside earlier, and this will be for the front cover. I'm going to take scissors, and you see the seam here? We're going to cut straight across the seam to open it up. Try not to cut the back. So I'm going to just cut a straight line, just following the folded line all the way across, and make sure you don't cut the back part. So you can see here that I'm cutting through the front part only. About a third of the way through, you're going to meet some resistance, and that means you've reached the other side. So I'm going to turn it around and cut it from this side. And there you can see it's opened up a little, but not quite. We're going to do some more cutting to open it up all the way through. So you see this diagonal line over at this side? I'm going to cut across that line, just like that. Then I'm going to do the same on the other side. And now the paper bag is opened up fully. And this will now be the base of our front cover. But before I add the pattern paper to this, I'm just going to trim that opening just to get rid of the jagged edges. Then I will glue down all the flaps. Actually, this is optional. I just like to glue things down so that at least everything lays nice and flat. So I'm gluing down this section, and then I'm going to glue down the other side as well. Now that everything is glued down, I'm going to show you how we're going to insert the pages and how this thing will close. So I'm taking the pages that I had folded in earlier and I'm inserting it inside, and I'm going to fold it in this way and the other side this way. Now it's really up to you how you want your folds to open. I like mine to open this way. Now I'm going to add the pattern paper, but first we're going to cut it. So the first thing I do with this particular pattern paper from Paper Rose Studios is I'm going to remove the branding strip at the bottom. I'm going to lay it exactly at the 12-inch mark and then cut off the branding strip. I'm going to save this for use later. Next, we're going to trim it down to 5 and 7/8, just a little bit smaller than 6 inches, just to give a nice border around the edges. Now, this pattern will be for the front, and then I'm saving this one because I'm going to use that for the inside. Now, I thought I was recording, but then I guess I was not. So I had already glued the outside. Pretty simple. I added glue. I used liquid glue here. It's important to use liquid glue, and you'll see why in a bit. So what I did was, while the glue was still wet, I already folded it in and inserted my pages because I wanted to train the paper to be able to fold in. And it's very important to do this while the glue is still wet. So now we're going to glue in the inner part. So I'm using the reverse side of the pattern. But first, I'm going to trim this off a little to create a nice border. So I'm putting it back in my paper trimmer and I'm going to just trim off about 1/4 of an inch to make it 5 and 7/8. Next, I'm going to add liquid glue all over the back, on the edges. It's very important, and just a little bit in the middle. Then I'm going to lay it down onto the paper bag, making sure there's a little bit of a border all around. I'll press it down, and while it's still wet, I'm going to fold it in right at the point where I'm going to put the pages. So just like that. And then you can see here, everything's nice and flat. And then on the other side, I'm going to do the same thing, press it down and fold it in. Just using my fingers to guide the folding in part. And then I'm going to add the pages just to make sure everything is nice and flat. Okay, now that everything is glued down, we're going to cover up the rest of the part. And I'm going to use this pattern paper. And we're going to cut it down. First, to remove the branding strip at the bottom. Then cutting it to 5 and 7/8. Then on the 5 and 7/8 side, I'm going to cut it to 4 inches. And I'm going to need 2 of these. So 4 inches. And then I like this pattern in the back, and I'm going to cut another 4 inches. Then I'll keep the offcuts to use later on. Next, I'm going to glue this down on the inside part. And don't worry about that seam there because we're going to reinforce it later. I'm adding more glue here where it ends for additional reinforcement. And then I'm going to glue this down slightly overlapping. And later on, we're going to reinforce that seam. Next, we're going to glue down this one over here. So I'm going to add glue at the back. And same thing. When I glue it down, I'm going to make sure it overlaps a little, leaving small border on all sides. Just like that. And then I'm going to use this strip to reinforce the seam. Add glue to the back and add the strip right on top of the seam. It also adds a decorative element. Now, if your pattern paper does not have this strip, you can always use washi tape or other strips of pattern paper. And I'm going to do the same for this inside cover. And there it is. The pages are now tucked in, nice and snug. So now I'm going to attach the pages to the cover. And I'm going to do this with some embroidery floss. This method may look a little intimidating, but I promise you it's quite easy. First, you'll need an awl. An awl is a tool that looks something like this. But if you do not have an awl, I have this picker tool, which I use for my die cuts. Either of those two will work. So first, I'm going to just eyeball the middle. Make sure that everything is lined up. And then I'm just going to poke a hole right in the middle of the pages through to the cover. Next, I'm going to poke another hole about 3/4 of an inch down from the top. Now, this one takes a little effort. I'm not sure why. I'm just going to put it down and then poke a hole through it. There. And then for the bottom part, same thing, about 3/4 of an inch from the bottom. And then make sure everything is lined up and then poke a hole. This one is much easier, of course. And then I'm going to take one of the needles from this, the smallest one. You can use an embroidery needle, that would work. And then I'm going to take some of the floss. I'm taking a fairly long piece, about that much, longer than I think I would need. And then I'm going to pass it through the needle and we're going to sew the pages to the cover. Super simple. So first I'm going to pass it through the middle hole all the way through to the cover. And I'm going to leave a little bit of the thread hanging down because we're going to tie it later. Then I'm going to, from the front cover, going to pass it through back, just like that. And then I'm going to go to the other side, to the bottom, pass it through. And now we have one long line of thread going from one end to the other. Then I'm going to pass it through the middle part. This can be a little tricky because sometimes the hole moves a little, but I'm just going to try to finesse it until it passes through to the other side, just like that. Okay, now I have to make sure that both threads are on either side of that thread that's running down the middle. And then I'm going to tie it. Make sure everything is nice and taut. Make sure it's right in the middle of the two threads on either side. Then I'm going to knot it once. I'm going to double knot this just to make sure it's extra secure. Then I'm going to double knot that. So knot it again twice. And then cut off the excess. You can tie a nice pretty bow if you want. So now those are the pages for my album. Next, we're going to open up these paper bags to make pages for the album. So I'm taking the first page, and then right here where there's a seam running down the middle of the paper bag, I'm going to cut right down to the middle. Then I'm going to do the same on the other side. Taking the seam right in the middle and cutting it all the way down. Now you're probably wondering, why didn't I do this while it was not attached to the album? And the reason is we need the stability of it being together, because then it becomes very difficult to cut the pages open when they're loose. So here are the pockets. And that is the first two pages. Next, I'll keep this blank. Now this is the flip open. This will flip open and this. So I'm going to open it up just like I did for the cover. I'm going to cut across this area. And then I'm going to open it up. And then I'm going to cut across the diagonal like I did earlier. Same thing. And then cut across here. Just like that. And now that opens up. Now I'm going to cut this part so that I can make this a page with a pocket. This, of course, will be another pocket, and I'll open this up as well. So I'm going to cut this across the diagonal and cut that also on the diagonal fold, and that will become one pocket. And then here I'm going to cut the inner seam of the paper bag, just like that. Just cut it and cut that. So the front flap will have a pocket. When you open it up, there's going to be a pocket, and then you can close it this way or you can close it the other way, just like that. Depends on how you like it. This one I'm keeping it the same because you can put stuff inside. And then this one I'm going to cut exactly the same way that I cut the others. Now that all the pages are done, let's put the ribbon closure. Now earlier when I had glued down that front part, I shouldn't have glued that area, but then it's okay because I was able to open it up. Now I take a ribbon, this is about 39 inches long, and on the 13th inch, I'm going to fold it in just like this, and I'm going to add glue to the fold. So I'm folding it, I measured 13 inches into the 39-inch ribbon length, and then I'm going to, here I'm flipping it over to the other side so that both sides are shiny on the shiny side of the ribbon. You don't have to do this if your ribbon does not have a satin finish. I'm inserting this inside, and then I'm closing it with a clip to secure it. So now we have it all tied up, and I'm going to take you through each of the pages. So here we have an opening in the front. For the original album, I did close it shut, but you can leave it open for additional space. Now this one is the first page right here. So you have pattern paper, which I stuck there, inserted it there. Of course, I glued that down. And then that's the pocket. And then I glued a strip of pattern paper as the pocket. And then for the next page, I left that blank. I, of course, decorated it with more pattern paper. Just like this, where I can add ephemera and photos and things like that. Now for the next page, this is actually my favorite part of the album, is this flip open part. So you have an area here where you can put pattern paper, and then you can have a pocket, just like this one. And then on this one, I added pattern paper and I put a vellum pocket. Then when you flip this open, I have another tuck spot or another pocket, this time a vertical pocket instead of a horizontal one. Then for this page, I decided to keep it open just for an additional storage space, and then I put pattern paper to decorate it and also to reinforce it. And then for the next few pages, I decorated it the same way. I hope you're inspired to make an album like this, and you can even do it with any size paper bag. You can use a bigger paper bag if you want your album bigger, or you can even use a smaller paper bag if you want a mini album. So you can add more pockets, less pockets. There's a lot of things that you can do with this kind of album. I hope you're inspired to give this a try, and if you do, please tag me on social media so I can see your creations, and I'll have that all linked down below. If you are interested in any of the pattern papers and materials that I used in this video, I'll have them linked below as well. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate you being here, and please like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss future videos like this. Thank you so much. Till next time. Bye.